tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast. I am your host, Kuda Mic, here with the man, the myth, the legend, my partner in crime, here in the flesh for a season finale of the nuMind series, where we talk all things mental health. Now, this is James Abraham, CEO of MindRight, our mental health expert. I might be bigging you up too much here, bro, but I'm so excited to have you here.
No,
I'm excited to have you here, bro. How are you?
It's too massive of an intro,
Nah,
bro. I'm
bro.
loving it. I'm loving Perth. I'm loving this weather because
Yeah?
there's a heat wave in Singapore right now. So I'm loving this cool weather.
Nice.
I'm super happy to be here, but let's get into it.
Awesome.
What do you want to talk about? Season finale. Let's go.
There's something that's been on my mind.
Yeah,
Relationships.
go on.
Relationships abroad. Obviously, I'm a migrant here, so this would apply to people who listen to this. How do you think people are affected mental health wise when it comes to relationships abroad? And what challenges do people typically face?
So I think when we talk about relationships, where we need to first start from is that we have to first accept that human beings are not isolated creatures. We are mammals who must have a social circle. That's why the pandemic was so difficult.
Right.
Because that was isolation. And even before the pandemic hit, actually, World Health Organization did release to the different countries that there is a growing epidemic of loneliness.
All right.
And that was just before the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And then obviously the whole world shut down. And I believe that we will really see the effects of the pandemic 5 to 10 years from now.
Okay.
Because you're still experiencing the lingering effects, right? So I don't think you can truly appreciate what it's done.
Right.
You can appreciate the immediacy of what it's done. But I think the long-term effects will be seen and felt 5 to 10 years. Because right now, when you're going through it, you don't know that you're going through it.
Right.
And so when we talk about relationships, and we talk about relationships abroad, we start with the fundamental point that with any relationship, it starts with recognizing you need them. I know people are in that mindset, like, I can do things alone and I don't need anybody. You don't need anybody until you need somebody. Because you can only go so long in isolation. So with relationships, the first thing is to accept we need them, right? And then once we accept that we need them, then we can move to the next stage of what is the quality of the relationships, you know? Like this topic, relationships abroad, I mean, it's easy to just go down that sort of couple relationship, right? And that's the easy point to get to.
Right.
But I believe that when we talk about relationships, we're encompassing friendships, right? We're encompassing classmates, workmates, family. Those are all relationships. And when you move to another country, those dynamics change. You know, there is a different element of that loneliness that kicks in because it's unrecognizable now.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not the traditional I'm alone. It's sort of like you're alone in a crowded room.
Oh, I like that.
Right?
Yeah,
So when you move to another country and then you go back to your family, those relationships change because they don't recognize who you are as much as, because they remember you from who you were before.
Facts.
Right? And so now when you go back, you're at this point in life where I'm not quite sure who this person is because they've been away for this long.
Yeah.
So those relationships change. The dynamics of those relationships change. So I think when it comes to relationships abroad and the psyche of how things shift, I think the first thing is to recognize that you have to be social. And then the second part of that is to also appreciate that there is going to be that change. Or maybe a better word than change is there's an evolution.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's growth, there's maturity, there's independence. Everybody says they want someone who's independent. Do you? Because independence is a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
You know, and you think you want it, and then you get it, and you're like, whoa, I said independence, but how you move out?
Yeah.
Why are you moving out? And especially from culture families, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I wanted you to be independent. This is too independent.
Yeah. Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't work that way. You don't get to control that.
Interesting you bring that up. How do you think a phase of your life affects that the need for relationships? For example, I'm envisioning we're here in this beautiful venue at Study Perth where I wish I knew this was here when I got here for studies, because I've just seen so many multicultural people walk through here.
Yeah.
And some friends I made who were playing FIFA.
Yeah.
They're bridging that gap. What then would you say to people who are maybe older? What does that look like for them?
So I think when you get older, so you start with a really large group of friends.
Right.
Because you go to university, you go to whatever educational institute you go to,
Yeah.
and you have all these friends, right? You've got your classmates, you've got the people whom you live with, you've got your the people who are living on campus, right? You've got all these different groups of friends. And then as you get older, they trim. And I'm sure you've heard that saying, you are the sum of the 5 people you have around you.
Yeah.
And who are those 5? Because it's not that they're bad. It's that they're bad for you.
Right.
Because you aren't the same person you were.
Yeah.
Because you may have been this one person when you're in uni.
Yeah.
And then life changed for you. There were different priorities. Things came into your life that you wanted something different out of, right? And so when those changes started to affect, you might have wanted different things. And so you changed. And so those friends that you were super close with and you were all brothers and whatever, now not so much.
Yeah.
Because you want something different. And then that's when you have to go find those people. You have to put yourself out there. And you'll sometimes not meet those people, because you'll meet people that you realize are, whoa, this is really not what I want. This is even worse than what I had.
Right.
And that's okay. That's part of growth, and that's part of the development. So when you get older, you just have to recognize, the better you know yourself, because we're always going to go back to that.
Yes.
The better you know yourself, the more honest you can be about who you want around you. And it's not an insult to those people, because they'll feel like, oh, you think you're better than us.
Yeah.
No, I just think I want different things.
True.
And I think if you can't respect me enough because I want those different things, I don't know that I want to keep this friendship.
Yeah.
Because I think you're being a bit disrespectful. Do you know what I mean? So I think when you get older, you have to know yourself well enough so that you can be honest enough about who you want around you. And then you can make those decisions.
I like where you're going with this. So when it comes to self and looking at your, I guess, how much you know yourself, what role does that play in making a connection with someone?
When you know who you are, you can trial and error a little bit easily on what works for you. Because you're not going to get it perfectly, right?
Yeah.
The better you know yourself, the easier it becomes for you to like you may think, for example, right? And you've said this on a few episodes where you've got that hustler mindset.
Yeah.
Right? And so you think, I know I'm at this stage in my life where I want to keep grinding, I want to put this work in and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so you think, I'm going to surround myself with people who are on this similar path so that I can learn from them.
Yeah.
Right? You do that, and then you find out, oh, I don't think I like this. Because they are on this hustler path just like I am.
Right.
But I think the way they're going about it isn't something I can necessarily agree with. And so you may slowly keep your distance, and then you go find another group. But when you find the other group, you'll now have learned something from that previous group. What was it about that previous group that I couldn't agree with? What was it about them that I felt impacted by? Because you can't go around telling people, oh, I didn't like you because you partied too much. You just didn't like to party.
Yeah.
They were free to make a decision on however they wanted to live their lives. They're free to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to reflect on yourself. So when you, like in that example, right? If let's say they partied too hard, so they have their like hustler mindset usually pairs with work hard, play hard.
Yeah. Right.
Right? Not everybody wants to play hard. So that's just you. You don't want to play hard. You can't say other people were playing too hard, because that's not a fair statement to make. You can't go around judging everybody else for how they choose to live their lives. So when it comes to how you look at yourself, you've got to adopt a mindset of, I am this person, I'm okay. We make jokes. When I go to a club, I like to sit down. That's just my life now.
Yeah.
Because I'm at that stage where I just want to sit. I don't want to stand up. It's sweaty. It's crowded. Just give me a good sofa.
Right.
Nice drink. Good music. I just do upper body moves. Because I just want to hang. So again, I got to know my crowd. Because I can have a group of people who are similar like me. I probably won't come because I want to sit down, have a nice drink, have a great conversation. Because that's where I am in my life.
Yeah.
Oh, you've changed, James. Yeah. You're supposed to change.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of those things where your psyche, the better you know yourself, the more easily you can adopt different mindsets.
Just to come back to change and people kind of evolving, right? I want to kind of look at that and go, I've heard that one of the best things to do in trying to make a connection with someone is to just find common ground, find what you have in common. That then changes at some point in your life because you know yourself and you know what you like, so you're looking for someone who likes soccer. This person doesn't like soccer. So it really helps to know yourself, right? But what would you suggest to someone who maybe is a bit introverted and to them it's like, okay, I'm fighting an uphill battle. Are there any tips you can give to someone who doesn't feel as comfortable putting themselves out there?
So, see, with introversion and extroversion, the only difference between the two is that an extrovert is comfortable being the center of attention. An introvert prefers not to.
Okay.
Neither of those two things has any reference to how you make friends. Because an extrovert will like the spotlight on them. An introvert would take conversations in a corner somewhere, right? Just little clicks, circles and that. There's nothing wrong with either of the two things. It's just the preference for the different personality types in how they engage in large social circles. Okay, but when it comes to making friends and that sort of thing, you don't have the spotlight on you. The extrovert is just probably going to be loud. Introvert's probably going to be soft. Neither of those two things impact how you make friends. But because we believe introversion is this thing where I can't make friends easily because I'm an introvert, it has a placebo effect because an introvert has got nothing to do with, introversion has got nothing to do with how you make friends. Introverts just don't like the attention.
Right.
That's it.
That helps. And I feel like, maybe it's just me, but I feel like we have a pretty decent understanding of how relationships can be formed from the jump. Now let's dive a little deeper into relationships abroad.
Go on.
What challenges do you think people who do make that move abroad face in those circumstances when they are, I guess, migrants?
So I think it differs obviously from person to person. But when we look at going abroad, we look at going through a different culture. Now we talked about breaking traditions. We've talked about how you go away from what you've been raised with. And so as soon as you get exposed to a new culture, there is an adaptation phase.
Right.
You know? I think one of the reasons I'm a really good psychologist is because I was blonde when I was adapting.
Yeah.
How am I to judge anybody?
Y'all need to see these photos, by the way, before you leave. It was a good.
Hey, I still think I looked all right in it. My wife begs to differ, but yeah, everybody's entitled to their opinions. Mine is that I liked it. But
I think it looked cool. I remember.
Thank you.
I remember.
I did.
Right.
But so that was my adapting phase. Because I didn't quite understand the Aussie culture. And I think there is a predisposition of what it is, and then there's the experience of what it is. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. Anytime there's a difference, there is adaptation that's required. Right?
Yeah.
And so as long as there's adaptation, there's going to be how you adapt. There isn't one way to adapt. Right? For me, when I came, my goal was to interact with as many cultures as I could.
Right.
Just everyone, because I wanted to know what it was like for people living in Saudi Arabia, rather than what I read online to what it's like living in Saudi Arabia. I wanted to know what it was like living in UAE, if there was a difference between Dubai and Abu Dhabi. You know what I mean? And then I also wanted to see, well, I've only known Africa as Africa. And then you meet people from the Zim community, people from the Ugandan community, from the Somali community, from the South Somali community. And then you realize, like, whoa, it's like they're not the same. Like the South Africans are not the same as those people from Zambia. And there's so many little differences.
Little nuances.
Little nuances. And because I wanted to experience that, there's so much that was coming at me. Because I'm still trying to adapt to the Aussie way of living. And believe me, when I first came, there's also the personal side of things. Do you know how to cook? Do you know how to make a living for yourself? How independent do you think you are? Because you think you're independent until you have to be independent.
Fact.
And then you realize, well, turns out mashed potato is not like
Beans on toast.
yeah, it's one of those like it's not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Let me get that can of tuna. I'm just going to eat that tonight. So it is one of these things where when there is an adaptation process, when you're adapting, there's going to be a lot of adjustments.
Right.
So when you and it's not just new country. You could go to a new job and there's an adaptation process.
Actually,
that's why there's probation.
Yeah.
When you get into a relationship, we call it a honeymoon phase.
Right.
Because you're going to be super nice to each other. And
I
then
I don't know about you. I stay being nice.
but then there's a point in that relationship where it's not just about being nice, it's how honest can I be?
Yeah.
Right? Like very, very, very basic example. That first honeymoon phase, your thoughts are rainbows.
Yeah.
And then once you get comfortable, rainbow no more.
Fact.
So it's one of, and I'm just using
very good point.
I'm using a very simple example, but that's adaptation.
Yeah.
Because the more comfortable I feel with you, the more I can be myself. And sometimes being myself is part of discovering who myself is.
Okay.
So when you move abroad and there's these differences, it could be like Singapore and Malaysia. We're right next to each other. But if you move from Singapore to Malaysia or Malaysia to Singapore, you're going to need to adapt.
Feel it,
because the cultures are different.
Right.
Right? Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
Next door neighbors. But when you move,
you feel it.
You're going to feel that adaptation. So whenever you move, as long as you're trying to develop relationships abroad, there is your own personal adaptation that you need to take on board. As you're taking that on board, that adaptation process will change you. As it's changing you, the dynamics of the relationships you'd normally form would change. And that's why sometimes when you go back to your own country, people who were friends with you before, well, they feel like they don't recognize you anymore. Hey, where's the Kuda that I remember? What are you doing? What is this work that you're doing
Story
now?
Of my life, bro.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they don't recognize you. And it makes you feel insecure because you're thinking to yourself, is there something wrong with me? Oh, it's just you're different. You change. And because we don't talk about it, you don't know that that's the normal part.
Yeah.
Because, of course you're going to be different. When you're just dating, you're one version of you.
Yeah.
And your partner is one version of themselves.
Yeah.
The longer you guys date, the more differences, the more differences and similarities you get to notice. You realize how good you are or not good you are for each other. And then at some point, when you get married, the dynamics change again. Because that's a public and lifelong commitment and all those other things. Yeah. And then you become a dad or a mom. And then you change again. Because now you've got someone else to take care of. So the dynamics of relationships are constantly changing. And if we pretend like, oh, it's no big deal, I'm just going to become a dad. Come on, don't lie to yourself. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
If I'm going to become a mom, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Those things impact the way you are and how you interact with the world around you.
So many really tangible tools examples, I guess, tools I can get out of that. Would you say adaptation is something you can get better at? Is it a skill you can sharpen?
I think it's a skill you can sharpen when you're conscious of sharpening. Because a lot of things that we do at a subconscious level. Okay. Because you don't even know you do it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if I asked you, do you know that you actively listen? If your answer was yes, I'd ask you to tell me how you know that. And if it was true, you could give me the answer in one sentence because you've spent enough time reflecting on it. So, and that means it's very conscious. So there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Right.
The Dunning-Kruger effect is this triangle, right? And it starts right at the bottom. Now, it's about competency.
Okay.
So it's about unconsciously incompetent. Okay? I don't say competency, I prefer idiot. You're an unconscious idiot.
Yeah.
Right at the bottom of that thing.
Yeah.
Right? So
you don't know what you don't know.
Most people sit there.
Yeah.
Because you're not even conscious yet.
Yeah.
You're unconsciously an idiot.
Yeah.
And then there's only 4 layers. Then you become a conscious idiot. This is the part when you realize, oh,
there's so much I don't know.
I've been doing this.
Yeah.
I've been offending you, Jesus. Why didn't you tell me this? So very simply put, it's like saying somebody's name.
Yeah.
You've been saying the name wrong the whole time.
I'm guilty of that.
Right? And you don't even know you're saying that name wrong.
Yeah.
So you're the unconscious idiot.
Yeah.
And then somebody tells you, hey, you've been saying that name wrong. Now you're the conscious idiot.
Yeah.
Because now you become conscious, but you're still an idiot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then you move to the stage where you're now trying to be a conscious expert, because now you're trying to say it properly. And so you're learning. And so every time you have a chance, you're going to try and say that name the way you can say it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah? And then right at the top, the little top of that pyramid is unconscious expert. Because now, because you've done it so often, it's now second nature to you. Now, I've used name, but I could use listening. I could use the way you think. I could use the way you adapt to changes. Like anything. You start off, everyone start off as an unconscious idiot. Right? And it basically, if I substitute the word idiot for incompetence, unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence, right at the top. So right at the bottom, when you're an unconscious incompetent, you don't know. And everyone starts there. No one is excused
no
from
one can
that.
skip that part.
You are all of us start from an unconscious idiot. And then when we recognize that we're an idiot, we're finally moving up the ladder into being a conscious idiot. And then when we're practicing certain changes in life, and do you know what I mean? Like when you try to adapt and whatever, then we become consciously becoming an expert now. And when we do it enough times, we get to the stage where we're now unconsciously an expert in something. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is where we slowly develop skills and tools to learn how to adapt. And it's when we become conscious of it that we can make those necessary changes.
I like that. I'm going to come back to that, but I should probably mention we've got friends in the building. And friends, if you guys have any questions, we don't have them for very long. So please ask away, or hold the question until we get to question time, and keep that in mind. On the topic of, let's not go straight to conscious competence, but the process of getting better at making friends. People see me today and they're like, oh, you're a natural at X, Y, or Z. People don't know that it's something I actively think about. And I was just on the phone 2 nights ago with a friend from Uganda.
Okay.
So I lived in Zim, Uganda, Kenya, and Uganda was their home. So they were reflecting and going, oh, dude, that was the easiest time of my life. I was like, oh, wait, you were home. I had to get out of my comfort zone, make friends, get familiar with that system. But then when she left and she went to another country, she was like, man, it was so challenging. And I'm like, okay, I don't find making friends challenging anymore because I had to do it multiple times. What would you tell a young Kuda, maybe going through it? Because we are hoping that the younger listeners, at a beautiful place like this in Study Perth, what can we give them to help them understand what that process is going to be like in the moment?
I think the best thing I can say is just be kind to yourself. You're gonna screw up.
Right.
That's just part of growing up.
Right.
When you try really hard, you'll probably screw up a lot more regularly. So there's that saying, right? Like when I don't try really hard to do good things, I'm just letting life pass me by, just doing rubbish, whatever. Nothing seems to go wrong. As soon as I try, everything's going wrong.
Right.
But that's because you're trying. It's part of the process of trying is failing. Trying doesn't mean success. In fact, success comes from failure. Success comes from failing 100 times.
100%.
But because we watch television or we watch shows, and you got to remember, those shows are 2 hours. Those shows are not 2 years. If you see what 2 years look like, then you get bored because it's boring. Because it's that person failing over and over again, that person struggling to just get on the right track, especially if you don't have a role model or you don't know what that looks like. So it's really trial and error. And unfortunately, with trial and error, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to screw up. And the worst thing you can do is think you're a failure for screwing up. But really, screwing up is part of success. So to any young person, the best thing you can do is just be a little bit kind to yourself. I'm not saying give yourself excuses. I understand that. I'm saying be kind to yourself in the sense that when you screw up, try and have an objective view on that screw up. Whatever it is that went wrong. Recognize that, look, I am human. This is the part I failed. But this is the part I want to be better. and then just try and be better at that part, because you're never going to be perfect.
Mm.
Because if you were perfect, then why are you alive?
Bro, I was not prepared for that.
I know.
That is, what?
Surprised me too. As soon as it came up.
That's a bar. I'm gonna use that. But if I can echo James' sentiments, I've been fortunate enough to learn over time that the more you fail, the quicker or the closer you are to success, because you get to try it and tweak it and do all that sort of stuff. So to young people listening, fail more, 100%, and fail fast. Might as well learn to think quickly.
It does help when you fail fast, because, and again, maybe when we say fail fast, the point that gets lost in the line fail fast is learn.
Yes. Yeah.
Because people always say, oh, you're very experienced, and you attach experience with age. I've met many people who are 50, 60, 70 who don't know who they are because at some point in their lives, something bad happened. It's probably traumatic.
Yeah.
And they never move past that point. So when it comes to living, it requires you, when you fail fast, more importantly, learn from that.
Yeah.
Take the time to reflect, and you only learn when you reflect.
Yeah.
You don't get to learn when you don't spend time reflecting. So when you reflect on yourself, and don't reflect on what everybody else did to you, right? You can't control them. You can't control the weather.
Fact.
You can't control how other people treat you. You control how you respond to other people. And that's the key, because that's how you learn. So experience isn't about how old you are. Experience isn't about, I've lived 40 years, 50 years, 70 years, I know more. No, you don't.
You don't.
How much have you learned from your life? Because those of us who have lived life and learned from it, those people have the benefit of learned experience, and they know part of learned experience is, I can't give you the answer.
Yes. Yeah.
Because my answers are going to be different. You have to go explore your own uniqueness. And so, because this is a season finale, of all the topics that we've done, right? Leadership, social media, all of those things. We always come back to this work on yourself component.
Yeah.
When you have leaders who are always picking on you, bosses who are always after you, that is a reflection of their lack of maturity, their lack of growth. Something happened to them that has stopped them from evolving. And when you get to that stage of maturity and you can see that, you don't even get mad anymore. You just sort of look at that and go like, oh, I can't help you. This is your journey, your life. You got to go through this yourself. If I can support, I want to, but it doesn't sound like you are ready for anybody to help you.
Absolutely.
And I can't force that. But I'm going to have to keep going on in my life, and I have to keep climbing on ladders. So I know you think you're going to block me. You're really not.
You really can't.
Because I am who I am.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? And it's not a malicious thing. It's not an anger thing. But when you are that confident in yourself and your own abilities, you're not looking around for excuses. You're not looking around to blame people. Because you recognize it starts with you. So, I mean, to come back to this relationships component, that relationship is you and your boss. That relationship is you and your peers. That relationship is you and yourself. And the stronger that relationship with yourself is, the less the relationships around you influence you heavily enough that you need to change drastically. You know what I mean? Because you love yourself enough. You respect yourself enough.
Self-love. Put the plug in for self-love. I'm glad you touched on social media, because when you reference what we see on TV and what we see on socials, I can imagine seeing what you assume is, a popular person. They've got so many followers. They've got so much of this. It's detrimental to people's health. Can you speak more from a mental health lens on what that does to people's ability to connect in a good or bad way, like social media? Because we did talk about it recently.
I think even on social media, when you're trying to build a relationship on social media, and we touched on this topic when we did that episode, where who are you online? Because you're not the same person as you are at work, right?
True.
So that online persona is a little bit different, right? And equally, when you're trying to connect with people online, just recognize that the person online may not be the same person in person.
Right.
Right? Because it's again, the person you meet at work isn't necessarily the same person you meet outside of work.
Yeah.
Right? And we've all experienced that, where we got along with a colleague really well, and then we're like, hey, we should go hang out. And then you hung out, and you're like, wow, that's ruined this relationship. Right? And so it's the same thing if you're online and you meet people and you think you've got a lot in common, and then you meet in person, you're like, wow, turns out, no.
Facts.
That's fine too. That's the whole trial and error part.
True.
Because how else are you going to connect?
Yeah.
And if you can connect with people online, great. But recognize that that's a persona. And it's no one's position to judge if that's a fair persona, unfair persona. That's who they want to be.
Right.
That's their choice, their lives. You got to recognize if it is or isn't for you. And if you thought it was and then it isn't, oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Learn from that. What can you take away? How can you be better at looking at someone and assessing if that person is a good fit for you or not? And then move on.
I like that. There's something you touched on early in our season that I really liked, which was and maybe you did. I just talked to you so much, so I don't know when you mentioned this.
Okay, go on.
It's the idea that people don't know what they want.
Yeah.
They know what they don't want, which kind of ties back into the whole trial and error thing.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at try and connect with people, what advice, I guess, would you give to someone bouncing back from, hey, I did try and I maybe didn't get along with that person, this happened, that happened, so there are those challenges with friction or whatever. Is there any advice around that you could share?
So apart from reflecting, sometimes it's difficult to reflect because you don't know what you don't know yet. And sometimes you're in your own way, right? So when you've had that sort of negative experience, you might be your own worst enemy because maybe you're overly critical of yourself, right? Maybe you're overly critical of the other person.
Yeah.
I can't stress this enough. Book a session with a therapist. Therapists are not there to advise you. If your therapist gives you advice, find another therapist. If your coach gives you advice, find another coach. None of these people are supposed to give you advice. These people are supposed to help you unravel your own thoughts. It's never supposed to be long-term either anyway, right? You don't go see a physiotherapist for a year or 2 years. That's just nonsensical.
Great point.
Yeah, like even when you go through massive surgery, I've been through 5 or 6 surgeries. I've never seen a physiotherapist for more than 6 months.
Yeah.
And I've had major surgeries because their job is to help empower you to go back on your own feet. Get on with life.
I like that.
That's what, and a physiotherapist, and they empower you. Imagine a physiotherapist empowering you, right? But then a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a counselor or a coach, none of these people whose actual job would be to empower you, don't empower you. And you're back in there 1 year, 2 years. Some people tell me, yeah, I've been seeing this therapist for 3 years. That's not a thing to say. That's horrible.
It's not great.
Because that means they're keeping you bogged down. So when you've been through something difficult, go see a therapist because they aren't supposed to advise you on how to get over it. They're going to ask you good questions. Questions that elicit thoughts that you couldn't have thought about yourself if you didn't get that question.
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't know that you didn't know that.
Yeah.
So now that they've asked you that question, it offers you an opportunity to think differently from how you used to think. And that difference, that slight pivot, now opens up a whole new array of questions for yourself. And now you can explore this part of you. And so as you explore this part of you, you realize, oh wow, okay, I see what maybe I could have done then. Let me try it now with someone new. But it comes from that self-exploration. But you cannot explore uncharted territories if you don't know that there are uncharted territories.
Well said. You don't know what you don't know.
So if there are uncharted territories, the best people who ideally should be able to help you are close mates, family, and those types of people. But if they don't exist, then it's going to be somebody like a therapist or a coach who, again, I can't stress this enough because stereotypically people think that these guys give advice. And as a coach and as a registered counselor and a psychologist, I can tell you we don't. I don't see people for more than 4 sessions.
Right.
So if you're going through something difficult, go see a therapist. You don't even need to know why you're seeing a therapist. If you walk into a room and you say, I don't know why I'm here, I just know my life feels like it could be better. That's fine. Start with that. A really good therapist can help you move on. A really good therapist can help you get more direction. You don't need like a very clear goal coming into therapy. You can just go, my life is shit. I need to be better. The therapist will ask you, well, what do you think could be better? I don't know. I just know it can't be this. And then we work at finding it. And again, it's not going to be 20, 30 sessions. It's going to be like 5 maybe or 6 to discover this part. So I think it's one of those things where go see a therapist.
Powerful answer. As you can hear this. Is there anything you would like to ask the expert while we're here? Because I've got...
I did have a question.
Go
Yes,
on.
Taylor.
How do you find the balance between self-improvement to get to what, like working on yourself, going to therapy, whatever, to get to a point where you can make meaningful relationships, or just going for it? Because I'll give you 2 examples. My cousin just goes for it.
Okay.
But she, time and time again, it's
Doesn't work out.
just a bad, like
Sure.
really bad.
Right.
And she recognises that she needs to work on certain things, but just goes straight to finding somebody. Does that make sense? And then you've got me on the other spectrum that's like, I'm just going to wait.
Yeah.
Because I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to keep working through the mental health stuff
Brilliant.
that affects my ability to make
I hear you.
relationships.
I like that.
But then
Would you be able to repeat the question for the mic as best as you understood it?
So what I'm hearing is that you're asking, how do we balance the self-improvement side of things, where I work on building a relationship with myself, and finding a relationship outside of myself with someone. And the examples that you gave was that your cousin just goes all out finding those relationships, whereas you're a little bit more cautious, you're working on yourself, but then how do you create that balance, right? Accurate? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question.
So this goes back to the first thing that we talked about, where human beings are social creatures. You will hit a glass ceiling on working on yourself, because part of the discovery is with someone else. And so when you've worked on yourself, as far as you can work on yourself, you have to take that leap of faith. And that leap of faith can be good, can be bad. That's the trial and error part, right? Because however that relationship forms, you'll get a sense of, is this working? Is this not working? And then you can be honest enough with yourself to go, yes, I want this in my life. Or no, I think this is unhealthy for me because I've spent enough time knowing what I want. So the reason why for your cousin it's usually, as you say, it goes bad, is because she doesn't know herself well enough. Because she doesn't know herself well enough, she takes these leaps of faith, but it's sort of like jumping off a cliff and you don't know how long your slack is. And so with no preparation, you don't know, the slack is you. You know how much you can take, you know how much you can fall before you need to go, whoa, too much slack. Too much slack means I'm going to hit the ground, right? So it is a balance of you working on yourself, but simultaneously finding those relationships. And as you, even when you find a relationship, you keep working on you. You don't lose that independence. The thing about working on yourself is you develop this trait of independence, but you don't know what independence look like until you're with somebody else. Because you think you're independent, but you're alone. It's easy to be independent when you're alone. Until you need somebody, now the independence looks very different because you're no longer alone, it's with someone else. So to your question, it is a trial and error thing, but you have to spend time with you first. Because when you spend time with you first, you'll know what you can and can't take. It could be something very trivial, like when you first see your partner's house and it's a mess, like food everywhere kind of mess, not even like just clothes, just like pizza box from 1 week ago because it's got a receipt still in there. And you could go, I don't know that I can do that. And then you go, everything about you is amazing. Can you change this part? They will decide then if they can or can't change. And if they can't change, then you got to make a decision. Do I live with that or do I want something else? because you are entitled to say, I want something else. That's you. That's because you're looking out for yourself. You may just go, look, I can't deal with this because there is every manner of bug in this house because of all the leftover food. And it's not something I can benefit from or deal with. So and you only know that because you've spent enough time with yourself, right? When you don't spend enough time with yourself, you don't even know that that bugs you. You don't know how to articulate that that bugs you. Because it bugs you, you feel it. You're like, am I just being a baby about it? Or am I just like being small about it? So,
I was going to see if we got any questions online.
okay.
And if not, I have one, because I was going to plug the something as simple as stereotypes, because I think we all deal with stereotypes. What is the best way to handle stereotypes? And I think I was going to ask that when we talked about controlling what you can control. And it's funny because you mentioned something before around, you think to yourself, am I going to be stereotypical by doing this thing?
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you don't do the thing.
Yeah.
Is that the best way
To
maintain, I guess, a mental health well-being or mental well-being? Is it best to avoid falling into those, or is it just one thing where you kind of go, hey, this is me and I'm comfortable with me? In fact, I'm very much the stereotype. Is that also okay? What can you say to someone who faces stereotypes and how they can navigate that?
So stereotypes are cultural constructs because they're not individual. The cultural construct is something we either feel comfortable or uncomfortable with. That's where a negative and positive stereotype will come from. So when we feel uncomfortable with a stereotype, it's because we're uncomfortable with the cultural construct of it, right? And so sometimes we distance ourselves from it because we need to, so we can build up a stronger sense of self, so that when that stereotype comes back, now because I've built up enough of me, it doesn't hurt me anymore. Somebody can say that stereotype and you can just go, it's not me though. And you don't have to freak out when you say it because you're just like, I know, but it's not me. I hear you. It does make me sad when I see it. But then you're not, because you don't identify with that cultural construct anymore. So with stereotypes, you have to recognize first, it's not you. It's and stereotypes are cultural based, because the stereotype that we have here is not the same as somewhere else, and it's always going to be different wherever you go. So the cultural construct of these stereotypes are very contextual on where they're coming from, and they may not necessarily be something that is real for that context. So whether they are or are not real for that context depends on how you feel about you. The stronger you feel about you, the less those things bother you, because you don't care what other people think. Because that's what a cultural construct is. What other people think about this race, about this ethnicity, about this people. So when you build your sense of self better, whatever somebody else has to say, you're entitled to your opinion. Do I look like that? Do I sound like that? If somebody else says yes, then I'll go, well, I feel sorry for you. And then you carry on with life, right? Because you're not bothered by it.
I love that, man. And as much as I've tried to find different angles, we keep coming back to the same thing. Self-image, you got to work on you. So I hope that throughout this whole season, it's kind of been the theme that ultimately you got to focus on you and get your mind right,
so that you can live a better life. Thank you, my friend.
Loved it.
Loved it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast, where we tell stories from the community. We can't do any of this without your support, and we can't thank you enough. But to help us grow, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Tune in next time for another incredible story from the community.